complex person. And with a straight face, they'll say, nobody built this. It made itself. Give it enough time, anything can happen. Guys, you know that you can ask your brain just about anything, and it will give you an answer. Of course, it may be wrong or incomplete, but it will try. There's something called an egocentric bias, and this is a tendency to rely too heavily on your own perspective or have a higher opinion of yourself than you really should in reality. It could be called I'm the smartest guy in the room bias, right? This might help explain why so many very smart people believe in evolution. They don't believe in a God they can't see, so they turn to theories that cannot be tested because they make sense to them. In 2012, Harvard did a study on people and gave them a task to do. They realized that there's two basic groups of people, lumpers and splitters. I don't know how much money they spent on that. The lumpers are people that relied on shortcuts and other rules of thumb to solve the problem. The splitters relied more on analytical thinking. They tended to be slower and require more time to complete the task. Both groups were then given a questionnaire about religion. The lumpers scored higher and were more religious, where the splitters, the guys that were more analytical, were less religious. The bottom line is this. No one saw the world being created. No one saw the origin of life. Psalm 14:1 says, "A fool hath said in his heart, there is no God." So when you look at this world now, and you look at the nature and all the complexity and diversity and the beauty, you've got a choice to make. Do you believe that all this happened by chance? The Seventh-day Adventist Church was raised up by God, in part, to be a witness against the last-day deceptions like this. We believe in a literal creation week that ends on the Saturday Sabbath, and it was designed to be a reminder and a memorial of God's creative power. We believe God spoke, and it was done. We believe that we're not just cosmic accidents, but we were intentionally designed by God for a purpose. So do you believe in evolution or do you believe in creation? Both rely on a hypothesis that cannot be fully tested. What does the observable data in the world support? Let's pray and we'll get into it. So join me if you can. Dear God, we ask that you open our minds and open our hearts. Please help us to see you clearly in your creation, Lord. Please help us to have what it takes and what we need to understand these complex things that we're about to talk about. Help them to clarify the fact that we know that you are our Creator, Lord. Please be with me and help me to make it through this. Give me the words to say. Hide me behind you. In your name, amen. Okay. Here's where it gets sticky. Okay. Let's begin where evolution must begin, with the origin of life itself. For if life cannot arise from non-life, the entire evolutionary theory collapses before it can even get started. The theory of abiogenesis, that life spontaneously arose from non-living chemicals, sounds scientific until you see what's actually being proposed. In 1953, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey conducted an experiment that textbooks still celebrate as proof of the origin of life. They passed electrical sparks through a mixture of gases and produced amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. What textbooks don't tell you is that they carefully selected the gases that they use. They excluded oxygen because oxygen would have destroyed the amino acids. But here's the problem. Geological evidence shows that the Earth did have oxygen. They also used the wrong mixture of gases, ammonia and methane, in proportions that would be toxic to any developing life. But the problems run much deeper. Even if you have amino acids, you need to assemble them into proteins. A typical protein contains about 300 amino acids arranged in a specific, precise sequence. The odds of getting just one functional protein by chance has been calculated at 1 out of 10 to the 164th power. To put that into perspective, there's only 10 to the 80 power atoms in the whole observable universe. You would need to fill the universe with amino acids and randomly assemble them billions of times just to have a reasonable chance of just getting one protein. And you don't need just one protein. The simplest living cell requires at least 250 proteins, each precisely folded and positioned. But proteins aren't enough. You need DNA to code for the proteins, RNA to transcribe the code, ribosomes to manufacture the proteins, and a cell membrane to contain everything. And you need an energy system to power it all. None of these systems can function without the others. This is irreducible complexity in its purest form. Realizing that even a protein was unlikely to be created in primordial soup, they propose other bizarre theories that include deep sea thermal vents, clay crystals, and frozen ice. But my favorite is one called panspermia, which theorizes that origin of life came from outer space. I know. Because they realized that Earth could not have created life on its own. But this only pushes that problem back one step. Where did that life come from? How did they originate life in outer space? The late Sir Fred Hoyle is one of the 20th century's most respected astronomers and an atheist. He calculated the odds of life arising by chance. He compared it to a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747 from the materials therein. That's his quote. He concluded that the odds were so astronomically against this that the belief in it was nonsense of the highest order. Evolution is not merely a scientific theory. It is a religious commitment to naturalism. As one evolutionary biologist candidly admitted, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic. Here's the fact that should humble every evolutionist. Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species in 1859. That's well before we knew what a cell was. In Darwin's day, scientists believed that a cell was a simple glob of protoplasm, basically a piece of salami. They didn't know what that was either. We still don't know. But Darwin imagined that gradual changes over millions of years would transform one species into another because he had no idea of the molecular machinery he was proposing to change. Today we know better. We have electron microscopes that reveal the cell as a factory more complex than any human-designed manufacturing plant. We have discovered molecular machines that operate with precision that makes our best technology look primitive. Let's look at the cells. In a cell, you have mitochondria, ribosomes, the Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus that houses the DNA, and the cell membrane. If any one of those parts is missing, the whole thing dies. Let's talk about the DNA. Every cell in your body contains about 6 feet of DNA. It's coiled and packed with such efficiency that if you uncoiled all of the DNA in your body and stretched it end to end, it would reach to the sun and back 60 times. This DNA contains 3 billion base pairs arranged in a specific sequence and codes for approximately 20,000 different proteins. But DNA presents a profound chicken and egg problem. The DNA contains the instructions for how to build the proteins, but the proteins are required to read, transcribe, and replicate DNA. You cannot have DNA without proteins, and you cannot have proteins without DNA, so which came first? Evolution has no answer. What would happen if you could stretch out all the DNA that you have on this podium? Absolutely nothing. It would dry up and die. There are other components of a cell that, as we saw, that are required to protect it. The information contained in the DNA is staggering. Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, observed, DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than anything we've ever created. Information always comes from intelligence. We have never observed information arising from natural processes without an intelligent source. Every computer program has a programmer. Every book has an author. Every code has a coder. The genetic code is no exception. The human body is the pinnacle of God's creative work. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalms 139:14. Every system, every organ, and every cell declares the glory of its maker. Let's examine just a few examples of this irreducible complexity in human anatomy that defies evolutionary explanation. Consider the brain. The brain is arguably the most important organ in the whole body. It has been called the most complex structure in the universe. It contains over 86 billion neurons. Each of those neurons is connected to 1,000 other neurons, forming more than 100 trillion synaptic connections. Those neurons communicate through electrical and chemical signals at a speed that would make supercomputers look slow. The brain, and specifically the frontal lobe, is where you make decisions. It's where conscious thought and religion live. As Adventists, we talk a lot about a healthy diet and abstaining from substances that can hurt your brain, specifically your frontal lobe. Anything that can hurt the frontal lobe can result in some very poor decisions. We've all heard about those. Hundreds of different diseases can affect the nervous system. If your brain dies, you die. Let's talk about the heart. It beats 100,000 times a day. It's a pump that circulates the blood through the body. It sends blood to the lungs for oxygen and to the kidneys and to the liver to remove waste products. The heart is comprised of an electrical system, a plumbing system, and a muscular system. All of these systems need to be in perfect working order to optimize functionally, for optimal functioning. Hundreds of different diseases can injure your heart, and if your heart dies, you die. Let's talk about your lungs. These are very complex. There is a thin layer of tissue separating the capillaries from the alveoli, allowing for gas exchange. That allows you to bring in oxygen and offload carbon dioxide. Hundreds of different diseases can injure your lungs, and you guessed it, if your lungs die, you die. Let's talk about your blood. You got red blood cells in there. They carry nutrients all over the body. They take oxygen to your tissues and remove the carbon dioxide all the way to the lungs. White blood cells are there to fight off infections. Platelets promote clotting, and they fix broken blood vessels and they stop bleeding. Consider the clotting cascade. This is pretty complicated. It requires a precise sequence of 12 different proteins to work. If you're missing any one of those 12, you either bleed to death or you clot to death. There are hundreds of different diseases that can affect your blood that can lead to death. Let's talk about your eyes. Charles Darwin himself admitted that the eye gave him cold shivers. He wrote, "To suppose that the eye, with all its imitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, would have been formed by natural selection. It seems, I freely confess, absurd to the highest degree possible." The eye is indeed a marvel. Light enters through the cornea and passes through an adjustable lens and focuses on the retina, which is a layer of tissue containing 120 million photoreceptors. These photoreceptors convert light into electrical signals that travel through the optic nerve to the brain, where they're processed into images. The eye can detect a single photon of light. It can distinguish between millions of different colors, and it can process visual information faster than any camera. But here's what makes the eye truly remarkable. It's not just a camera. It's an integrated system. The eye requires the brain to interpret signals. The brain requires the eye to receive visual input. The muscles require nerves to control the movement of the eye. The tear ducts require glands to keep the eye lubricated. Remove any one of these components, and the whole system fails completely. What good is a retina without a lens? What good is a lens without a brain to interpret the image? And what good is a brain without eyes to provide input? Of course, I could go on and on. The human body contains numerous systems that are irreducibly complex. In order to have a functioning brain, you need all these systems working together in a coordinated fashion just to survive. If you lose one, you lose them all. Each of these systems bears the unmistakable marks of engineering. They have specified complexity, functional integration, and purposeful design. They are not the products of random mutations and natural selection. They are the handiwork of a master designer. Let's talk about math. The mathematics of impossibility. I wish Dan was here. He's our math teacher. He could help us understand this, but let's do this anyway. Let's speak plainly about the mathematics of evolution. When we calculate the odds of even a simple biologic structure arising by chance, we enter into the realm of mathematicians call impossible. Consider the odds of getting a single functional protein of just 150 amino acids by chance. There are 20 different amino acids in a living organism. The number of possible arrangements of 150 amino acids turns out to be 20 to the 150th power, a number so large it exceeds the number of atoms in the observable universe. But only a tiny fraction of these, when combined, would lead to a functional protein. The odds of getting one functional protein by chance this way would be 1 in 10 to the 164th power. It's a crazy number. It's absurd, really. But life requires not one protein, but hundreds of proteins. The odds of getting just 200 functional proteins has been estimated at 1 out of 10 to the 40,000th power. This number is it just defies comprehension. In fact, it's probably not even a real number, right? There's only been 10 to the 17 seconds since the supposed Big Bang happened. Okay, so we're talking numbers like ginormously bigger than that. Getting 200 functional proteins would then be about the same odds as winning the Powerball lottery every second since the Big Bang. The odds of winning the Powerball lottery, just in case you're wondering, is 10 to the 8th power, if you play. Sir Arthur Eddington, a famous physicist, calculated the odds of life arising by chance was 1 to the 10 to the 40 billionth zeros at the top. He concluded the theory that life arose by chance is philosophically absurd. Yet evolutionists will still tell you that given enough time, anything can happen. This is not science, it's faith. It is faith that defies mathematical certainty. It's a faith that believes the impossible because the alternative is unacceptable to them. The fossil record presents another mathematical problem. If evolution were true, we should find millions of transitional forms, creatures caught in the act of evolving from one species to another. Darwin admitted that this is the most serious objection to his theory. He wrote, "Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection that can be urged against my theory." Over 150 years later, the situation has only gotten worse for evolutionists. We have excavated millions of fossils from around the world. We have found fossils of soft-bodied creatures in the Cambrian explosion. We have recovered preserved dinosaur tissue and blood cells. And what have we found? Stasis. Every major animal phylum appears suddenly in the fossil record, fully formed with no transitional ancestors. The gaps between major groups remains as wide as ever. And when evidence fails, evolutionists resort to storytelling. Let me tell you some of the truly bizarre theories that have been proposed to keep the evolutionary faith alive. When they couldn't find gradual evolution in the fossil record, they came up with a theory called punctuated equilibrium. That suggests that evolution happened in rapid bursts, too fast to leave fossils, and then it's followed by a long period of stasis. This isn't science. This evidence doesn't support their theory. They just claim that the evidence is missing. Also, in response to missing gradual evolution in the fossil record, they also came up with another theory called hopeful monsters. It explains the lack of transitional fossils by suggesting that there are sudden massive mutations that produce a whole new species in a single generation. This flies in the face of everything we know about genetics. Mutations are overwhelmingly harmful and at best neutral. Beneficial mutations are very rare. The theory was proposed to bridge large gaps in the fossil record, but it lacks empirical evidence. Critics have argued that nature does not provide a single well-documented example of a hopeful monster that suddenly initiated a new species through a single mutation. Because animals that are unrelated on the evolutionary tree have similar structures, but could not have possibly come from the common ancestor, they came up with another theory called convergent evolution. This theory claims that unrelated species independently evolved similar features. So like bats and whales both evolved echolocation separately. Excuse me. Siri wanted to get on this. I'm not sure how to turn that off. Okay. All right. So what they're saying is bats and whales both developed echolocation separately. And of course, they're not on the same evolutionary part of the tree, is the way that they've described it, right? Doesn't make any sense. Same thing with birds and insects. They both developed flight separately. Humans and squid both evolved camera-like eyes separately. The odds of this happening just once are astronomical. The fact that they claim that it happened repeated times abandons probability altogether. Sometimes they have difficulty explaining why animals, which are more closely related in the evolutionary tree, are still so different. For instance, apes and humans look similar, but they have some major differences. Humans have less hair, more subcutaneous fat, and apparently we can control our breathing much better, which allows us to talk. So they developed an aquatic ape theory, which suggests that humans evolved through a semi-aquatic phase. During that, the living in the water, it helped humans develop these traits. There's also zero evidence of fossil evidence to support this concept. And then there's another one called, no, I'll stop after this. There's another one called endosymbiosis. The claim that mitochondria were once free-living bacteria, and they were engulfed by other cells and formed a symbiotic relationship. This is presented as fact in textbooks, but it's pure speculation. There is no evidence that mitochondria were ever free-living bacteria. The theory doesn't explain how the complex protein import machinery evolved, or how genetic codes became integrated, or how the synchronization of division was established. What all these theories have in common is that they're not based on any observable, testable, or repeatable science. They're philosophical commitments dressed up in scientific language. They are myths of a secular religion. Here's a fact that should trouble every honest seeker of the truth. The theory of evolution was widely accepted well before we had the technology to test it. Darwin published his theory in his book in 1859. The electron microscope, which revealed the complexity of the cell, was not developed until the 1930s. The structure of DNA was not discovered until 1953. Molecular biology, which shows the impossibility of gradual evolution, did not exist until the late 20th century. Evolution was accepted on philosophical grounds, not scientific ones. The Enlightenment had prepared Western culture to reject divine authority. The French Revolution had demonstrated that you could overthrow kings and churches. The Industrial Revolution suggested that progress was inevitable and unlimited. Darwin simply provided a scientific-sounding justification for what people wanted to believe, that they could be their own gods, accountable to no creator. This is why evolution has persisted despite mounting evidence against it. It is not scientific theory that can be falsified by evidence. It is a worldview that interprets evidence to fit its own assumptions. As one philosopher of science noted, Darwin is not a testable scientific theory, but it's a metaphysical research program. The Seventh-day Adventist Church was raised in part to bear witness against this deception. Our pioneers recognized from the beginning that evolution was a direct attack on the foundation of our faith. If Genesis is not literal history, then the Sabbath is not a memorial for creation. If there was no literal Adam who fell, then there's no need for a literal Savior to redeem us. If death existed for millions of years before humans, then death is not the wages of sin, and the gospel is a lie. Ellen White warned us, the world is in need of a revelation of the science of salvation, and the Lord has raised up a people to give this message. The foundation of their faith is the Word of God, and their message is the third angel's message. This message includes the call to worship the Creator, which makes no sense if there's no Creator to worship. I look forward to every Friday night. As the sun sets, Sabbath begins. When we observe the Sabbath and rest from our work, we have the opportunity to spend time with God. He is our Creator. We can relax and spend time in His Word. The Sabbath is a memorial of creation, the sign of God's authority, and the seal of His covenant. When we keep the Sabbath, we're standing against the evolutionary lie. We're saying, I believe in the God who created the heavens and the earth in 6 literal days. I believe that He rested on the seventh day and blessed it. And I believe that this day belongs to Him, and I honor Him by keeping it holy. Joshua stood before the children of Israel and issued a challenge. Choose this day whom you will serve. Joshua 24:15. Today, I issue the same challenge to you. You have to choose between the theory of evolution or the God of creation. You cannot choose both. You're either a cosmic accident or you're designed by the Creator of the universe with a specific purpose in mind. God is all-powerful. He can just speak things and they're created. Just because you don't understand how or why doesn't make that less true. 1 Corinthians 1:25 says, the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. The evidence is clear. Nature supports creation. We see evidence in His handiwork all around us. The complexity and diversity of nature indicates a God that created the world for our enjoyment. Evolution requires mental gymnastics that are illogical. The mathematics are undeniable. The only reason to believe in evolution is that you want to believe in it, because the alternative requires you to acknowledge a Creator to whom you're accountable. The good news is that the Maker of the universe loves and wants you. He wants us to be with Him forever. He died to give us that opportunity. All you have to do is accept the invitation. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. He will forgive you of those sins if you just ask Him. We look forward to a new earth free from sin, sadness, and death. This is our hope. This is our message. This is why we must stand firm against the theory of evolution, not with hostility, but with confidence. Not with anger, but with compassion, armed with the truth that sets men free. Do not be intimidated by academic credentials or scientific jargon. The truth is plain for those who have eyes to see. Stand firm. The Creator is coming to take His children home, and soon every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is the Lord, Creator, the Redeemer, and the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. I want to leave you guys with a couple Bible verses. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Psalms 19:1. And the last one is, you are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. Revelation 4:11. Okay, let's see. I'm not sure what our closing song is. They know.
Our closing hymn is hymn number 88, I Sing the Mighty Power of God. Hymn number